No contact is often misunderstood. People see it as avoidance, as silence, as a way of cutting someone off without explanation. But that's not what it truly is. No contact, when done with intention, is not an act of retreat. It's an act of strategy. It's the moment you step back, not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to stop fighting a battle that only drains your strength. You're no longer reacting out of pain or fear. You're responding with awareness. You realize that silence can be your sharpest weapon when it's used with discipline and purpose. In life, emotions often blind us. When someone hurts us, disappoints us, or leaves us uncertain, our first instinct is to speak, to explain, to fix, to chase. But the more we chase, the further we move away from ourselves. The more we try to be understood, the less we understand our own peace. No contact is the strategy that stops that spiral. It's the choice to pause the noise, to pull back your energy from the places where it's been leaking, and to allow space for the truth to surface. It's a form of emotional intelligence, the understanding that sometimes saying nothing says everything. This kind of silence is not passive. It's focused. It's alert. It's awareness turned inward. You begin to observe rather than react. You start seeing patterns that were once hidden under the noise of communication. You notice how much of your energy was spent trying to change things you couldn't control. And slowly, as the silence stretches, clarity begins to form. You see the situation for what it really is, not what you hoped it would be. That's when you realize the power of strategy over emotion. When you practice no contact, you take a step back not out of pride but out of precision. You are gathering strength. You are allowing distance to work as your teacher. You are giving time the chance to reveal what people's true intentions are when you're no longer available. Because when you step away, you stop feeding their comfort with your attention. And in that silence, their actions, or their lack of them, become louder than any words could ever be. That's the strategy. Let reality expose itself while you remain calm, collected, and grounded. No contact isn't about ignoring. It's about protecting. You're not punishing anyone. You're protecting your energy from being wasted on confusion. It's the difference between reacting to every vibration of your phone and realizing that not every message deserves your focus. It's about choosing peace over chaos. You begin to understand that your silence doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you've learned to care for yourself first. That shift from needing a response to finding calm in the absence of one is where real growth begins. In that quiet space, something beautiful happens. The mind starts to declutter. The heart starts to heal. You realize that you can exist peacefully without needing constant communication or reassurance. That kind of stillness gives you control, not over others, but over yourself. You're no longer moved by temporary emotions. You're guided by long-term clarity. This is the essence of no contact. It's not the sound of silence. It's the sound of strategy. Eventually, as the days pass, you begin to feel your energy return. The same energy that was once scattered in messages and emotions now begins to build within you. You become more focused, more grounded, more present. And that's when you realize something profound. Silence was never the goal. It was the method. The goal was awareness. The goal was peace. The goal was strength. So understand this. No contact is not about walking away forever. It's about stepping back until you can stand firm again. It's about choosing clarity over chaos, discipline over impulse, and peace over reaction. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. When you choose no contact, you are not just choosing silence. You are choosing to reclaim your energy. Every word you speak, every message you send, every emotional reaction you give away carries energy. Most people don't realize how much power they lose in their attempts to be understood, accepted, or validated. But the truth is, every time you chase after someone's attention, you drain a part of yourself. You spread your focus thin across places and people that no longer pour back into you. And that's why no contact isn't about cutting communication. It's about redirecting your power. It's the strategy of returning home to yourself. When you stop reaching out, the first thing you feel is emptiness. That's because your energy has been flowing outward for so long that stillness feels strange. Your mind keeps telling you to do something. Text her, explain yourself, fix what's broken. But the wisdom of no contact is in understanding that energy doesn't need to be spent. It needs to be restored. The moment you resist the urge to reach out, that energy doesn't vanish. It begins to flow back to you. It gathers, strengthens, and centers you. You begin to realize that the peace you were searching for in someone else can only exist when you stop giving your power away. Energy is the currency of life. Whoever or whatever you give it to, you invest in. No contact is the strategy of reinvestment, pulling your energy away from where it's been wasted and putting it back into where it belongs, your purpose, your healing, your growth. It's not about ego. It's about efficiency. It's about no longer pouring into emptiness. You start to understand that your attention is sacred, your emotions are sacred, your presence is sacred. And when you give those things too freely, you lose their strength. But when you conserve them, when you protect them, you become powerful again. Most people misunderstand this. They think no contact is about proving a point, about winning a game of silence. But the real strategy isn't to be louder in absence. It's to grow in peace. The longer you stay grounded in your stillness, the more you begin to see how unnecessary all that chasing was. The same energy you once used to analyze messages, to replay conversations, to overthink decisions now becomes fuel for your transformation. You start reading, training, building, creating, pouring your energy into something that multiplies instead of drains. That's the quiet beauty of this process. Your energy becomes your weapon, your shield, your compass. Eventually, you begin to notice something subtle but powerful. Your energy starts to shift. The desperation that once lived in your chest fades into calm. The anxiety that once drove your actions begins to dissolve. You stop reacting and start observing. You stop needing validation and start embodying value. That is what happens when energy returns home. You stop fighting for peace because you've already found it. When you reclaim your energy, everything changes. You attract differently, think differently, and live differently. People who once took you for granted begin to feel the absence of your presence, not because you tried to make them, but because your energy was always the real connection. And when you pull that energy back, the dynamic shifts naturally. You no longer need to prove your worth. Your silence already does that for you. So remember, no contact is not punishment. It's protection. You are not withholding attention to create confusion. You are redirecting it to create balance. The energy you once wasted trying to be heard is now being used to build the strongest version of yourself. That's the strategy, not to disappear, but to evolve. Because the moment you stop giving your energy away to what drains you, you begin to glow with what sustains you. The true strength of no contact lies not in what happens outside of you, but in what begins to transform within. When you stop reaching out, when you stop chasing explanations, a powerful silence fills the space, and in that silence, your mind begins to face everything it has been running from. This is where the real battle begins, not between you and the other person, but between your emotions and your discipline. Every urge to text, every moment of weakness, every thought of maybe just once more becomes a test of your inner stability. And that's exactly why no contact is not just about withdrawal. It's about self-mastery. When you first start this journey, you will feel discomfort. You will feel the weight of missing someone, the ache of uncertainty, and the pull of what was familiar. But this discomfort is not your enemy. It's your teacher. It's showing you the areas within yourself that were dependent on external validation. It's revealing how much of your peace was tied to someone else's presence. And as difficult as that realization may be, it's also freeing, because once you see where your emotional attachments are rooted, you finally have the chance to reclaim control over them. Silence forces self-reflection. It holds up a mirror and makes you confront who you are when no one is responding to your messages, when no one is reassuring you, when no one is there to fill the quiet. You begin to see the parts of you that crave attention just to feel secure, the parts that confuse connection with self-worth. And through that awareness, growth begins. You start asking deeper questions. Why do I need their response to feel validated? Why does their silence hurt me so much? What am I truly seeking from them that I haven't given myself? These questions are uncomfortable, but they are necessary. They build emotional intelligence, the kind that cannot be faked or forced. In this phase, no contact becomes a training ground for your mind. It's a practice in emotional discipline. Every time you resist the urge to reach out, you strengthen your self-control. Every time you choose to stay silent instead of reacting impulsively, you build your inner resilience. It's no different than physical training. Just as muscles grow through resistance, your emotional strength grows through restraint. And soon, what once felt unbearable starts to feel empowering. You begin to realize that the silence you once feared has now become your source of calm. With each passing day, clarity starts to replace confusion. You begin to see the situation not from a place of emotion, but from a place of understanding. You recognize patterns that were invisible before. You see how much of your energy was spent on temporary emotions, on trying to fix things that weren't meant to last. You realize that your peace doesn't depend on anyone else. It depends on your ability to control your focus. That's when your silence transforms from emptiness into strength. It becomes a reflection of your maturity, not your pride. As your emotional control deepens, so does your confidence. You no longer chase closure because you've already created it within yourself. You no longer seek validation because you've started validating your own worth. You no longer fear being forgotten because you've remembered who you are. That's the power of mastering your emotions through no contact. It gives you back the control that emotional chaos once took away. The moment you learn to stay calm in the face of uncertainty, you've already won half the battle. You've proven to yourself that you can survive without constant reassurance, that you can choose patience over panic and strength over reaction. And that is where true power lies, not in controlling others, but in mastering yourself. Because when your emotions no longer dictate your actions, no one else holds control over your peace. When you step into no contact, you quickly realize that silence has a strange way of revealing the truth. It exposes things you couldn't see when emotions were clouding your judgment. It's not just about staying quiet. It's about watching what unfolds when you're no longer involved in the noise. When you stop chasing, when you stop trying to fix things, people's true intentions begin to surface. Their patterns, their priorities, their respect for you, or the lack of it, become visible in ways that words could never show. That's the beauty of distance. It doesn't just give you space, it gives you clarity. When you are emotionally involved, everything feels urgent. You want answers. You want to know why things happened the way they did. You want closure. But silence teaches you something deeper, that not every answer needs to be spoken, and not every truth needs to be explained. Sometimes all you have to do is step back and observe, because when you stop feeding situations with your energy, the real dynamic reveals itself. You begin to see who values your presence and who only values your attention. You begin to see who was genuine and who was comfortable only when they had control. Silence exposes all of it. The moment you stop reaching out, something interesting happens. People who were used to your attention start to feel the void. They notice the absence. They realize that the energy you once gave so freely was actually holding everything together. And in that stillness, they begin to reveal themselves. Some may return with sincerity, others may stay away. Either way, you learn what's real. You understand that you don't have to chase honesty. It always shows up when you stop running after it. That's why no contact is not just emotional control. It's a truth detector. It filters out what's temporary and highlights what's real. This phase of silence also sharpens your intuition. You start trusting your inner voice more than their words. You begin to notice how actions align, or don't, with promises. You become more aware of patterns you used to overlook. And slowly, You start realizing that your intuition was right all along. You just couldn't hear it before because the noise of constant communication was drowning it out. That's why distance is powerful. It gives your inner wisdom space to speak. But here's the deeper layer of this strategy: silence doesn't just reveal others, it reveals you. It shows you your attachment patterns, your emotional triggers, your need for control. It brings to light the fears that used to drive your actions: fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of being forgotten. These fears lose their power when you face them in stillness. You start to see that you don't need constant validation to feel secure. You don't need someone's response to prove your worth. What you need is truth, and silence gives you that truth in its purest form. As you begin to see things clearly, the emotional fog lifts. You're no longer lost in overthinking or what ifs. You're no longer chasing interpretations or trying to read between the lines. Instead, you're grounded in reality. You start accepting people for who they are, not who you wish they'd be. You stop holding on to potential and start valuing patterns. That's when emotional maturity truly begins, when you learn to see without distortion and love without attachment. In the end, silence does what no argument, no explanation, and no message ever could. It brings clarity. It teaches you who's real, who's temporary, and who's meant to stay. It shows you that energy never lies and actions always speak louder than words. You learn that distance doesn't destroy real connections. It only exposes fake ones. And once you understand that truth, you'll never fear silence again. You'll use it as your greatest strategy. There comes a moment in no contact when something inside you begins to shift. The silence that once felt heavy starts to feel lighter. The pain that once consumed your thoughts begins to fade into understanding. This is the moment when you start to reclaim your power, not by getting a response, not by receiving an apology, but by realizing that you don't need either to move forward. You start to feel your energy returning, your focus sharpening, your emotions balancing. You're no longer reacting to the absence of someone else. You're responding to the presence of yourself. That's when no contact becomes more than a strategy. It becomes transformation. At first, this transformation feels subtle. You might not notice it immediately, but day by day, as you resist the urge to reach out, you begin to notice how much mental space you're regaining. The thoughts that used to circle around someone else start turning inward. You begin reflecting on your own path, your own purpose, your own growth. You realize that the silence you created between you and them was also the space you needed to rediscover yourself. The world around you begins to feel different, not because it changed, but because you did. In this stage, self-worth starts to rise naturally. It's not about convincing yourself you're enough. It's about seeing, truly seeing that you always were. You begin to understand that love, attention, and validation were never meant to be begged for. They were meant to be mirrored by people who respect your energy. You stop trying to prove your value through effort, and instead, you start embodying it through peace. You move differently. You speak less but with more meaning. You no longer feel the need to chase closure because you realize that closure isn't something they give you. It's something you create by deciding to be done. This transformation also shows in how you handle emotions. Where you once reacted impulsively, you now pause. Where you once sought reassurance, you now breathe through uncertainty. You start trusting time. You start trusting distance. You even start trusting silence. That's when emotional strength becomes your default setting, not because you've become numb, but because you've become grounded. You're not running from pain anymore. You've learned how to sit with it, understand it, and let it pass. That's emotional maturity at its purest form, the ability to stay calm even when things don't go your way. People often think healing means forgetting, but it doesn't. Healing means remembering without the same pain. It's the moment you look back and feel gratitude instead of resentment, peace instead of chaos. That's when you realize how powerful your silence has been. It didn't just distance you from someone else. It brought you closer to your highest self. You've learned discipline, patience, emotional intelligence, and boundaries. You've learned to be alone without feeling lonely. You've learned that you can lose people and still not lose yourself. That's growth, quiet, powerful, and irreversible. And here's the irony: when you reach this point, you no longer care about winning the silent battle because you've already won it. The battle was never about making them regret losing you. It was about reminding yourself of your worth. When that awareness sinks in, everything changes. You no longer react to the old patterns. You no longer crave what once drained you. You begin to attract peace instead of drama, respect instead of confusion, and clarity instead of chaos. The silence that once felt like punishment now feels like protection. You no longer see no contact as an act of disconnection. You see it as an act of elevation. It's not about walking away. It's about rising higher than the noise. And when you reach that level of peace, you understand something profound. Silence wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of your strength. When the storm of emotion finally settles and the silence becomes your new rhythm, you begin to understand the final truth about no contact. It was never about them. It was always about you. It was about returning to your power, about mastering the art of restraint, about learning that strength is not always loud or visible. Sometimes strength is quiet. It's the calm decision to not react, the patience to not chase, and the wisdom to not explain. It's realizing that peace is not something you find through someone else. It's something you build within yourself when you stop letting others control your emotional temperature. As the days turn into weeks, you begin to notice how much lighter you feel. You're not constantly checking your phone. You're not replaying conversations in your head. You're not stuck in the cycle of wondering, what if, or maybe. Instead, your attention starts to shift toward the future, your future. You begin thinking about what truly fulfills you, what drives you, what you want to create. That's the moment you realize that no contact was never about losing something. It was about making space for something greater. You cleared emotional clutter, and now you have room to grow. This is where your silence transforms into a statement, not a statement of pride, but of presence. People begin to notice that your energy feels different, not desperate, not confused, but centered. The same silence that once made them curious now commands respect. You're no longer reacting from emotion, you're responding from power. And that's the ultimate strategy, letting your growth speak louder than your words ever could. You no longer need to prove your worth to anyone. You've become proof of it. There's a certain kind of peace that comes you stops explaining yourself. You realize that not everyone needs to understand your choices, and that's okay, because those who are meant for you will understand through your energy, not your explanations. No contact teaches you that distance doesn't just protect your peace. It refines your circle. It filters out those who were drawn to your attention and leaves behind those who are drawn to your essence. That's not loss. That's alignment. In this stage, you begin to live differently. You wake up without the heaviness of emotional dependency. You start to enjoy your solitude, not as loneliness, but as empowerment. You become comfortable in your own company, realizing that silence isn't emptiness, it's freedom. You start setting boundaries not as walls, but as gates, open to those who respect your peace and closed to those who disturb it. And the most beautiful part, you start to attract people and opportunities that match this new version of you. Your energy becomes magnetic, not because you're chasing anything, but because you've learned to simply be. The power of no contact isn't just in walking away. It's in what happens after you do. It's in the way you rebuild yourself piece by piece. It's in the patience you develop, the focus you gain, and the self-respect you refuse to compromise again. You begin to understand that love doesn't have to mean attachment, and peace doesn't have to mean isolation. It means balance. It means choosing yourself without guilt and letting others meet you at the level of the peace you've created. By the time you reach this level of awareness, you've already evolved past the version of yourself who needed to explain, prove, or beg for anything. You understand that silence wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. It wasn't punishment. It was protection. It wasn't the end. It was the reset. You no longer see no contact as something you did to someone. You see it as something you did for yourself. And that's when you finally realize the deepest truth of all. The real victory was never about getting them back. It was about getting yourself back.